Chapter 4 is focused on the lean technique called 5S Organizing, which is used for cleaning and organizing a physical or virtual workspace. The first video provides an overview of 5S, what's involved, and why it's so useful. The second video describes 6 different types of workspaces that you can consider when deciding where to apply the 5S technique. These include office areas, storage areas, reception areas, and support areas, as well as specialized spaces like retail spaces and restaurants. Where appropriate, both the physical and virtual versions of these spaces are described. 5S Organizing does make a workspace more transparent, but it also reduces waste and improves the work that is carried out within that workspace. This next video describes how it actually reduces waste. The final video contains specific instructions for planning and carrying out the 5 steps of a 5S organizing event. This video is supported by the 5S event guidelines document, which is available for download. Okay, so let's talk about 5S Organizing, which is the event you'll be doing this week, hopefully. So 5S Organizing, this is another technique for cleaning up and organizing a workspace. So I say workspace because it can be like an office area, a physical area, a storage room, file cabinets, reception areas. But it can also be a virtual workspace. So more and more, we're moving from physical to virtual, where we do the work. And this has been going on for a while. I mean, when we started using emails, now communication is being done, through this virtual email servers. But more and more, especially with the pandemic, now there's a lot going on. Like, Lewis, it sounds you do a lot of work on Slack, and a number of you are out on these virtual platforms, and that's where a lot of the work happens. And the good news is that you can organize those, and Lean works just as well, but we're all kind of learning how Lean works there. So I am going to try my best to cover that for you guys. The idea is when you 5S an area, you're creating a workspace with minimal clutter, minimal distractions. And so the reason it works well is now your employees can focus on the work of satisfying customer needs, right? That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to satisfy the needs of the customer, whether it's an external customer or an internal customer. Another great thing about 5S, once you 5S the workspace, it can actually relieve stress. Okay, it makes it easier to work, it's safer, it's more pleasant to work when it's clean and organized. So it's one of the slam dunk, Lean techniques, and it's typically used at the beginning of trying to get into Lean. So that's why it's the primary way of improving that I'm have included in the course. So the 5 S's, they're actually steps: sort, straighten, scrub, standardize, sustain. And I'll get into those in just a second. But in a physical workspace, for example, like a storage room here, you can see a before and after. So this is the intent, is by going through these steps, you move from something that looks like this to something that looks like this. And you can see, these chairs are gone. I don't know where they are. This table got folded up. Used to be, to get to the shelves, you had to reach over the table and jump under a fan. Now it's all accessible. You notice there's all color-coded bins. There's some markings on the floor. There's labels over here. Now, all of these things, these colored bins, floor markings, labels, that's what we call visual controls. So designing those will be the subject of the next class. So for this class, we're just talking about doing some basic, and we're going to actually just do the first 3 of the 5S to get some basic cleanup and organization. And then the next week, you'll do standardize, sustain to add in more, of the visual controls, and maybe even do a work cell arrangement, things like that. A number of you are working more down here. So on the top, you see these are the physical office areas, and these are like virtual office areas. Slack, that's a whole place where you can collaborate. It's almost like a open shared office, but it all happens in the cyber world. Zoom, we know about, we're Zooming. Microsoft Teams, Rennie at Monday, And this is another new one that's all kind of a platform. Another type of area, file storage areas. So you've got physical files, the good old traditional file cabinets, and medical files often are in set up like this. But in the virtual world, now we start digitizing everything, right? Word documents, Excel, PDF, emails are now digitized files. Google Drive, a place for shared files. SharePoint, Matt, I know you use that. Another type of space are reception areas. So in a physical, bricks and mortar company, these are like waiting rooms and areas where people come in. And in the virtual world, this is what your websites are, your social media platforms, Facebook, LinkedIn, okay? Support areas, these are, don't really have virtual equivalents because they're all kind of physical, supply rooms, bathrooms, coffee areas, break rooms, copy areas, mail rooms. All these are areas that are potential workspaces that could use organizing at times. And you have to figure out what makes sense. Now, the last two are specialized. So retail space. So George, this is obviously you. And so when as a retailer, of course, you have some of the other things. You have some office, you have some back, storage rooms. But what's very important and unique is the front end. And I know your retail space is actually eBay. That's where, right? That's where customers come, like this lady, to find something. Oh, I like that. What's the price? Okay, I walk over to the register, I buy it. I mean, everything that goes on in the space goes on here. And this there's a whole science behind how to organize retail spaces, but not so much yet, I think, how you organize the virtual retail space. So, and then restaurants. So this is Madame, of course. And again, a lot of specialized space. You still do have, supply rooms and office areas, but you have, for example, a lot of refrigerated storage. You have food prep areas. You have bars, liquor. That's a big issue in restaurants, liquor inventory. You have the table setups. You have condiment areas. So all of these are potential areas to be organized using 5S. But you do also have your online, your virtual world now with the Grubhubs and Uber Eats, and this is how you interact with the public in more and more cases. So, how are you set up? What does your menu look like on Grubhub, Uber Eats? What is the user experience? Is that to order something, come in and get it, and so forth. It's really amazing what a 5S does. Waste of defects. When you organize, there's less chance of making a mistake because things are clear. You don't grab the wrong thing. You don't grab the wrong file. If there's something missing or damaged, it becomes clearly visible. So you don't, everything's lined up. When something's out of place, not right. So it avoids making mistakes. Waiting, it's just quicker to find things. I know, Gabe, you were talking about, I go in, I look for these files, it takes me forever to find them. When it's organized, less waiting. You find out right away if something's not there, you can order it. You don't have to wait for a rush order. Like we're going to do a big project today where we need a ream of paper and we're out of paper. Now we got to rush and find some paper somewhere. Waste of effort, easier to find things, put them away. Normally you're consolidating space, so there's less walking, less reaching, just easier and more pleasant to work in. A waste of materials, okay? No duplicate ordering because you know what you have. I mean, how many times have you ordered another case of cleaner because, oh man, I didn't realize I had a whole case behind, but it was hidden, I didn't know it. So a lot of times you double order, and you can damage things when it's disorganized. It's easier to damage when you're pulling a box out and so forth. So anyway, those are the kinds of things you can expect when you 5S an area. So you do have to pick a target workspace, and I'm going to try to walk you through that a little bit tonight. We can talk about it then separately. You can send me an email, we can text, phone call, whatever. But you basically want to pick a workspace, just like the target process, something that's meaty enough, but not too crazy, because you want to be able to do the first 3 steps in no more than about 3 or 4 hours. Okay, after that, it just gets to be too, too much. And so we'll talk about that. I'll give you some further feedback tonight on that, and then we can talk individually. So let's look at this, what the 5 steps are. So the first S is sort, or think of it as separate. What you're doing, you're sorting for physical goods into similar groups. So for example, if you were sorting a garage, done it a million times. In one part you put keep. I want to keep this stuff. I want to give away or repurpose this stuff. I want to throw out, discard this stuff. So just fundamental breakdown. Doesn't have to be that way. It can be other breakdowns. It also applies to virtual items like files and folders. If you're trying to clean up a virtual workspace where you have a bunch of files and folders, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. Separate them into groups. Now, when you get into the discard group, be aware, if this is a shared workspace, which hopefully it is, if somebody's who uses the space is not there, and you're not sure whether to throw it out, what you want to do is use a red tagging method. What that means is, you found some piece of equipment, or it could even be a file or folder that you think maybe we should throw this out, but you know that there's a bunch of people that might use it. So in the physical world, you put an actual red tag on it with a future discard date. Like if you did it tomorrow, say, this is going to be discarded in July 1st. And then when anybody strolls in there, maybe 2 weeks from now and sees, oh man, I use this thing. Who's, so it should have a phone number, like call here, so this doesn't get thrown out. So these are just some of the practical things you need to be aware of. Straighten. So once you've sorted, then you straighten. So this is kind of putting things in order. So once you've, some basic, putting it back on the shelf, putting it back in the folder if it's files. This is where you want to follow this. Just do it, then improve it. Don't spend a whole lot of time figuring out how to organize it right. Just do what feels right. Do common sense. Boom, get it back. And that's what straighten is. Scrub is actually, or shine clean, is actually cleaning it and finishing, getting rid of any things that don't belong. It could be in physical world, dirt and debris. In the virtual world, maybe some files that just don't belong there. But it's important, it's an important step. So these are the 3 things, the 3 S's that you would need to do this coming week on your target workspace. Then the following week, standardize, or sometimes you can say systematize or optimize, is to now reorganizing it in a better way. So you've the first 3 S's let you kind of see what you've got, get it a little more visible and accessible. And then later, usually at a later time, you can come in and start reorganizing it, doing the visual controls, doing the colored, labels, et cetera, et cetera. We'll go into all those. That'll be a lot of what next week is about. And then the last S is to sustain it. And, this is important. You need to have some explicit way. Maybe you have a 5S day every few months. You go and check these workspaces. Because, if you don't do that, these things do tend to degrade. And I always say a pile creates another pile. So if things start getting out of order, it can get out of order pretty quickly. So for what you're doing here, one of the really useful things to do is you just take an after picture of the physical space and post it in the space. And it's like, this is what this should look like, guys. So it's a simple, quick way to specify kind of a standard work idea.